Evening. I call to order the March 26, 2008 meeting of the Los Gatos Planning Commission. My name is Michael Kane. I serve as chair of the Planning Commission. My fellow commissioners and I welcome you and thank you for attending tonight's meeting. The Planning Commission is composed of citizens appointed by Town Council to review planning and development issues and to make decisions and recommendations to the Town Council regarding land use for both commercial and residential matters. As we hear discussion tonight, we will consider each proposal and evaluate how it supports and enhances the quality of life we enjoy in Los Gatos. Ours is a quasi-judicial procedure guided by the town's general plan, zoning codes, and other standards and guidelines that have been adopted by the town. Again, thank you for attending tonight's meeting. We appreciate public testimony and look forward to yours as we evaluate each application. As a general reminder, please silence your cell phones. And Mr. Suter, would you call the roll?
Commissioner Rice.
Here.
Commissioner Sayoc.
Here.
Commissioner Machichi. Commissioner Talasfor.
Excused.
Commissioner Bourgeois.
Here.
Vice Chair O'Donnell. And Chair Kane.
Here. Commissioner Sayoc, would you lead us in the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We move to approval of the minutes. Do we have discussion, or may I have a motion regarding the minutes of our March 12 meeting? Commissioner Bourgeois.
Did we have any public speakers on? So I'd like to move to approve the minutes with one small modification. On page 6, it says that I encourage the applicant to become LEED certified when in fact I encourage them to pursue green business certification, which is slightly different. So I'd like that correction made. And that's a motion to approve with
Do I have a
that.
second? Commissioner O'Donnell seconds. Discussion? Commissioner Sayoc.
On page 6, I believe it's the 5th paragraph down, the motion by Vice Chair Tom O'Donnell and seconded by Commissioner Bourgeois. One of the bullets that I had, one of the requests that I had made before voting in that is that the applicant, when the conditional use permit returns in 1 year, is that the applicant will demonstrate its benefit to the community. And I'd like that noted in the minutes.
Can you do that, Mr. Suda? Is that acceptable to the maker of the motion?
Yes.
The seconder?
yes.
Sir. Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-0. 5-0. It's still 5. Written communications. We have no written communications that I know of tonight, so we'll move to requested continuances. And we have no requested continuances, so we will move right along to subcommittee reports. In addition to our Planning Commission responsibilities, each of us serves on 1 or 2 subcommittees. The Historic Preservation Committee, for example, meets on the 3rd Wednesday of the month. And tonight, Commissioner Machichi will give us the report from that subcommittee.
Oh, thank you. We approved an application for exterior alteration on Broadway. We continued a demolition request on University, approved a window request on Fairview Plaza, and continued a window request on Eden Avenue. And we approved, in terms of architecture only, a home on Johnson Avenue, but it is exceeding the FAR, so we termed it in for architecture only in this circumstance. Another business, one thing I might mention that it was very helpful, I think, in the historical, we allow a mini study session to come. People come in and present their concepts, and we give them advice on what they might do before they come in formally. And it seems to work very effectively for the second meeting. I just mentioned that. Okay. The last thing I want to mention, though, is I'd like to apologize to the Planning Department for causing the confusion that was here 2 weeks ago, or 2 meetings ago, regarding the zoning ordinance. It turns out that the wording in the ordinance was exactly what was recommended by the Historical Committee. Okay, they approved it that night. They had put the words in the meeting before that, so I'm not sure where the confusion was, but we clearly confused the issue in doing so. There were only 3 members the night it did pass. We resolved that on matters that critical from now on, we should have at least 4, maybe 5 people there. And we are re-looking at the wording that we did approve once, and is subject to change. Our chairperson, Kendra Birch, is holding a special meeting next Wednesday, so we can expedite the matter. So it should be before us at the next meeting.
Commissioner, when you say zoning, do you mean by that the residential design guidelines?
Yeah, that's what I said, residential design guidelines and zoning ordinance.
Thank you.
Okay,
Good. Thank
Ready?
you for that report.
so please accept our apology.
Any other committees that I may have overlooked? We move on to verbal communications. As is your right, any member of the audience may speak for up to 3 minutes on any subject not on tonight's agenda. If you intend to speak, please fill out a speaker card located on the seat back in front of you so that we have a record of speakers, and turn that card into a staff member on your right. When you speak at the podium, state your name and address for the record. Understand that state law prohibits the Commission from taking any action or discussing any topic that may be presented during verbal communications. And tonight I have 1 card, Citizen Ray.
Yes. Can't resist speaking, representing the public at a public meeting. I cannot say no to it, okay? What an opportunity. My first comment, I want to recognize the great track record in the Planning Commission here of our chairman, our newly elected chairman, Citizen Kane. Fantastic. He's running now for town council. Fantastic. Okay? Here's a man who knows how public commissions work. Okay? He knows to put aside his personal whims and go to the public documents each and every time when there's an item before the Planning Commission. It is beautiful. And I think in particular, some time ago, when Mr. Kane was on the Chamber of Commerce board, and I brought the question to him in private. I said, how can you serve the people on the Planning Commission and serve the Chamber of Commerce? I mean, you've got a built-in conflict of interest every time there's a business matter before you. And he recognized that and withdrew from the Chamber of Commerce. And that is pure Americanism. Hooray for Citizen Kane. Okay? Lastly, how ugly the issue of the skateboard park. How ugly the lies and the Nazi-style technique that was used by the gruesome threesome on the town council to spread the nonsense that they did, and left some 2,000 Los Gatos kids on skateboards without a place to go to safely recreate their sport, okay? Unbelievable to me that these 3 would lead the charge of the community to turn down the kids. The kids now don't count in Los Gatos. Obviously, don't count. And we're going to see that that changes. We're not giving up and we're not going away. And we're going to get those kids a place to do their sport off the mean streets of Los Gatos, where everybody goes too fast, practically, okay? and where most people run the red lights and most slide through stop signs. And we want the kids off the main street. And you'll hear more from us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we move to consent calendar. We have no items on consent tonight, nor do we have any continued public hearings. So we move to new public hearings. We have two new public hearings tonight, the first of which is 15405 Los Gatos Boulevard, Suite 103. Before we hear this case, it is necessary to say that if the subject property is within 500 feet of a commissioner's residence, or if the commissioner holds a lease within 500 feet of the subject property, that commissioner must recuse him or herself. This subject property tonight is within 500 feet of property that I lease, so I'm recusing myself and handing the gavel to Vice Chairman O'Donnell. I will return at the conclusion of this case.
All right, this matter is an application for a conditional use permit. And the property is 15405 Los Gatos Boulevard, Suite 103. It's requesting approval for a children's wellness center in an existing 3,082 square feet office suite on property zone CH. Does the staff have a report on that?
Yes, we do. I just wanted to introduce you to Jennifer Savage, our assistant planner, and she will be making the staff report.
Good evening, Commissioners. The project site is located on the west side of Los Gatos Boulevard, approximately 1/4 mile north of Los Gatos Almaden Road, at 15405 Los Gatos Boulevard. The site contains an office building with 9 suites, 8 of which are currently occupied by personal service and office activities. The surrounding properties to the north, the east, and the south contain commercial uses. To the west are single-family dwellings. The applicant is proposing to establish a children's wellness center in Suite 103, a 3,082 square foot suite previously occupied by the Santa Clara County National Bank. The Children's Wellness Center will provide fitness and nutrition classes, fitness instruction, and limited physician consultation, in addition to providing fitness equipment areas. The required number of parking spaces for the existing uses and the proposed Children's Wellness Center is 71. The site currently provides 71 parking spaces located behind the office building. Therefore, the proposal complies with the parking requirements. The traffic engineer concluded that the project will not cause an increase in traffic and there are no traffic mitigations required. The use will be limited to 4 staff members on site at any given time. The number of children will be limited to 14 in the exercise and lecture classroom and 14 in the remaining space, for a total limit of 28 children on site at any given time. The hours of operation will be limited to Monday through Thursday, 9 a.m. to 8 p.m., Friday and Saturday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., and Sunday from 9 a.m. to noon p.m. These limitations are included as recommended conditions of approval. After the staff report was finalized, an updated floor plan was submitted, which showed the existing kitchen labeled for party use. While this is not included in the applicant's letter, the applicant does wish to conduct parties on site. The parties will be limited to the same number of children and staff members. Parties will be limited to 2 times per month, conducted indoors on Saturdays between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. These limitations are included in the recommended condition of approval contained in the staff report addendum. This concludes staff presentation. Staff is available for any questions.
Do any of the commissioners have any questions of staff? All right, before we start, I should reflect that we have both the staff report and one addendum to it. I think we all have that. That having been said, I will now open the public hearing and ask for Mr. David James or the other representative of the applicant to speak. You'll have 5 minutes. After you're through, anyone who wants to speak on the subject can speak, and then you will have rebuttal of 3 minutes.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thanks for allowing me to address the Commission and attendees on behalf of the application for conditional use permit Briefly for background, I'm David James, as mentioned. I'm the founder and CEO of Youth Wellness Associate, or known as FUSE, Fit for a Kid, and I sincerely believe our application up for approval is wholly in concert with the general plan and the spirit of the town code. I thought I'd briefly tell you about me, personally, our program, our goals, provide you some background in terms of our motivations, our processes, our people, and what our anticipated outcomes are. I'm a local fourth-generation resident. I attended Bellarmine College Prep, met my wife of 12 years in Los Gatos, have children 4 and 7. They both attend school in Los Gatos. I'm a youth coach. I hold a Master of Science in Health Administration and Health Services, and I've been in my field for 17 years. I am pleased to be seeking permission to serve the children's health, fitness, and nutrition needs by leveraging both technology and proven fundamentals, with an emphasis on the word fun, of certified youth fitness, health promotion, education, sports conditioning, and or injury prevention. As such, FUSE, as we're known, is the first and only truly comprehensive multidisciplinary physical fitness nutrition program in the country, and it will be right here in Los Gatos. We hope to continue the tradition, of the Los Gatos community, and hope that those values that I now see in my generation, prior generations, are passed down to the next generation. And I'll say as a side note that one of my concerns or fear of consequence, should this not necessarily happen, but in general should we not address some of the epidemics I'm going to talk about, is that I might walk down one of our streets in Los Gatos in 5, 10, 15 years, and instead of seeing children and young adults walking, hiking, biking, running, they'll be sitting around playing with computers, Game Boys, talking on their cell phones and their laptops, and will be clinically unfit and unhealthy. That's my concern. Our mission is to inspire and motivate kids to develop the lifelong habits necessary to promote, achieve, and advance the skills required for optimum health. We'll accomplish this through collaboration, of which we've already started that with Los Gatos Saratoga Recreation, Whole Foods Market, Los Gatos Little League, of which we're a sponsor, local pediatricians, and of course our schools and administrators. We plan on working with other qualified organizations as well, but I can't speak to that specifically at this point in time. Don't know. Moreover, we're a place for kids to actually call their own, where fitness is fun, where we'll accomplish this by creating an exciting and rewarding experience focused on success for the kids who join our program or access our services. Here are just a few sobering facts. I won't dwell because we all know. Obesity is the #1 threat to the health and well-being of children today. Children today, for the first time in human history, have a shorter life expectancy than us. Between 14 and 27% of local, meaning Los Gatos, school kids are clinically unfit or overweight, and between 1/3 to 60% of kids in Los Gatos, Cambrian, and Campbell school districts fail the presidential physical fitness standards test in 7th grade. Statewide, and I'm not talking about Los Gatos here, so statewide cumulatively, less than 10% of elementary and middle schoolers receive daily physical education. It's not an indictment on schools, it's just a state of what the facts are. We try to create a fun and have facility-based multidisciplinary fitness program by combining or fusing scientifically validated components of exercise, creating a holistic or overarching approach to achieving a healthy lifestyle. Our comprehensive wellness center is dedicated to kids primarily in grades K through 8, although we're flexible, and will provide a place and a means where young aspiring athletes, athletic teams, and most importantly for students and children of all different shapes and sizes and backgrounds can learn what it is to be and actually feel fit. We'll provide a transparent, state-of-the-art value proposition for parents, such that they'll see us as best in class, where our programs, including our nutrition and confidence building, are developed and supervised by a licensed pediatrician and clinical psychologist. Our focus is on prevention and instilling enduring habits required to live a healthy lifestyle, as well as the advancement of current skill sets for those that have some. We seek to empower children and their families largely through strategies focused on play, and we aim to create an exciting member-based program where kids get fitter in a very safe and non-intimidating environment. I should say that safety is obviously our #1 priority in terms of the planned construction, ideally, of our facility, as well as the fact that all fitness and sports coaches, teachers, and trainers are certified and credentialed youth conditioning specialists. We're members at the administrative and the executive level of the Positive Coaching Alliance from Stanford, and all employees have or will have passed employment, Department of Justice, State of California background and fingerprint check, and ultimately we're dedicated to what our motto is, and that's helping kids go, play, and achieve in that environment. So in closing, I do believe this is a groundbreaking opportunity, not just obviously for me personally and for kids, but for Los Gatos. There is nothing else like this in the country. And with that said, I really thank you in advance for your comments and your feedback. Be happy to answer any questions should you have them.
Thank you, Mr. James. Why don't you wait a second, we'll see if there are any questions. Does anyone, yes, Commissioner Sayak?
Mr. James, I applaud your efforts, and I'm quite excited by your business proposal. Just two quick questions. One, will you have bike parking available on the premises? And the second is, what programs and/or incentives will you provide to your clients so that they come to your facility not in a car, but on a bike, walking, some other alternative form of transportation?
That's a great question. I can tell you now that there is, and I can't tell you if it's ample or not, there is bike racking right now directly in front of the facility. Our plan is to actually have outdoor skateboard racking as well as additional outdoor bike racking in the rear of the facility where our entrance is. So in terms of encouraging that, I can tell you that our education, our nutrition programs, and our philosophy is around movement. And so that's obviously part and parcel of biking as opposed to driving in a car or whatnot. I'm not sure if your question is from a traffic perspective or just from a motivation perspective and movement perspective, but I hope I answered it.
It did, and it was strictly motivation.
Thank you. I'm likewise intrigued by this business plan. And you obviously are much better versed in this topic than I am, but it's my understanding that childhood obesity is especially a problem in certain underserved populations. Do you have any plan to try and reach out to beyond the Los Gatos community into some of those populations?
That's a great question, and it's absolutely come up. So I can answer that from a two-part standpoint. Right now, our pediatrician that will be our chief medical officer currently serves markets. She is one of the largest pediatric weight management lifestyle professionals on the West Coast. And so I'm honored to have her literally become part of our facility and our chief medical officer. Because of that and her training at Lucille Packard's and her programming, she has children now that come to her from Gilroy and Morgan Hill and Milpitas. With that said, our program is a member-based program. We would like to set up some sort of an endowment or a needs-based scholarship program for kids that cannot afford our program. I'm open to and I'm open to looking at, obviously, matching donations, matching gifts, things of that nature for those kids. Our member and capacity is limited based, obviously, on our square footage. So what's appropriate in terms of setting that aside, I don't know. We do expect that we'll draw from people beyond a 5 or 10 mile radius, such that we do now in Morgan Hill and Gilroy.
Any other questions? Mr. Machichi?
I read where you're taking children up to K-8?
Yeah, approximately 8th grade, yes. And then really
Up to the 8th grade?
up to the 8th grade. It really depends on the child.
Can they be? How
I'm sorry?
young can they be?
Well, right now the idea is that the child should be able to enter kindergarten, and if they're entering kindergarten, they're not yet in kindergarten, what are the children's needs? So does the children come from a large family? And I mean large in the context of, are they the youngest of 4 older siblings? Have they been coached before in any youth sports or participating in other activities? And that might speak to the maturation level of the kid. And can they be coached? Can they follow direction? That's usually the issue there. And so approximately 5, 6 years of age would be kindergarten.
Okay. And one last question. Are you thinking of increasing the age to 18 or so? Because I have a couple of candidates.
Well, so a couple of our head coach in particular has coached multiple sports at the high school level. And so on a limited basis, we do expect that we would like to serve some team training, some sports-specific conditioning for kids that are up to that age. Our philosophy is around prevention, and the idea is to get the kids earlier before they've developed some of those maybe not ideal habits. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Ford. I have no cards here, but if anyone wants to speak, any other member of the public, and they can give us a card when they come up or after they're through speaking. So is there one? You can sit down, Mr. Ford.
Yeah, I was going to say I have one more comment. It's relative to the addendum.
Okay.
So I received the addendum today, and so I wanted to respectfully request some clarification around, and I'm referencing the addendum item number 1, A, and it would be up to two birthday parties. I wanted to clarify that our parties are, yes, birthday in nature, but they're also celebrations of achievement, and so I would request that we use the word parties in a more general sense. However, because birthdays fall on different times during the year, my concern is that a child might have a birthday, let's say, on the 2nd or the 5th. We've already used our birthday dates up, and therefore the child can't come because it's not nearest to that Saturday, let's say. So I'm requesting that that be increased to 4 parties per month during normal business hours, as opposed to up to 2 birthday parties per month conducted only on Saturdays between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. And so I just received this, so that's sort of my request based upon what I'm just looking at right now.
All right, then, before you stop, I'm going to ask my fellow commissioners if they have any questions on that additional request. Yes, Commissioner Sayak?
A question to staff through you, if that's okay. Out of CUP, are neighboring residents notified? And if so, have we received anything from any neighbors?
Neighbors are notified, and we have not received any comments from neighbors.
Commissioner Bourgeois?
I just want to clarify your request. So our addendum says 2 parties on Saturdays, and you want 4 parties per month during normal business hours.
That's correct.
That's correct, okay. And does staff have any, well, maybe during commission discussion, we could get some feedback from staff on if that changes anything relative to traffic or?
I could add and even restrict that further in terms of, instead of normal business hours, normal weekend business hours, if that's any.
We'll discuss that when we close the public hearing. We'll also discuss it with staff. And let me ask Ms. Savage a question. Ms. Savage, when it was noticed, was there any discussion in this much depth, that is the number of parties, on the noticing?
No, the parties were not included in the
So
noticing.
this change is not going to affect the notice, is all I'm trying to get at. So the notice did not deal with the number of parties.
Correct.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Mr. Ford. Now, I think there was one, let me sit down, one speaker who wanted to talk on this item. Is that correct? No. All right, then we have no speakers, so it'd be very difficult for you to rebut. But if you'd like to have a concluding couple of lines, you could. All right, if there are no speakers then, and you have nothing further to say, we'll close the public hearing, and we'll have the discussion here, and we'll continue moving down the line, and we'll start walking through right now.
I'd like to first maybe see if staff has had time to consider that change, and does it change staff opinion or the traffic impacts?
It doesn't change our opinion. As long as the restriction on the maximum number of children remains at 28, then we don't have any concerns.
And you have some language in mind as to which condition should be changed? And
So if you're looking at the addendum, we would, from staff standpoint, 4 parties per month would be acceptable, and we could eliminate B, which limits it to Saturday currently.
Okay, so that being said, I'm going to go ahead and kick this off with a motion.
Excuse me. Let me understand it. Could they be having the party of 28 as well as the classes they may be having during the day? Or will this only happen on weekends anyway?
One of the conditions were the maximum capacity is 28
That's what I want
total,
to
including whether it be parties.
So they can't have it at the same
Right.
time. I don't see a problem. Go with the motion.
All right, Commissioner Bourgeois, you have a motion?
Sure, I would like to move to approve conditional use permit U-08-002 for a children's wellness center in an existing office suite zoned CH, and the APN is 424-19069. And I'm required to make the following findings under Section 2920-190 of the Town Code. And that based on the evidence before us, I can make the findings that the proposed use for this property is desirable to the public welfare, as the applicant stated. Childhood obesity is a serious problem in our society right now. It will not impair the integrity or character of the zone, as the use is compatible with uses in the existing complex. It will not be detrimental to public health. In fact, it will help out, and it is in harmony with the various elements of our general plan and the purposes of the town code.
Is there a second?
And that motion would be with the changes as documented by staff.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second.
I think Commissioner Sack, you had your hand up on that? Okay. Any discussion? Commissioner Rice?
Just for clarification, the question of staff, I'm in support, but are we not being redundant with the restrictions? Do we care what they're doing inside at a given point when we call it a party, or whether if there's 28 kids in, there's 28 kids in? What's the thought process behind the restriction on calling it a party or not calling it a party?
It simply gets to the character of the business and the way notice was presented to the residents within 300 feet, that this was a fitness center and fitness center primarily, and not a children's club that is primarily focused around parties.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously with 2 parties being missing.
And appeal rights. Anyone dissatisfied with the decision of the Planning Commission may appeal the decision to the Town Council. The appeal must be filed within 10 days. It must be filed upstairs in the Clerk Department. There is a fee for filing an appeal.
And thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell. Well done. Our new second public hearing is 15-720 and 15-736 Winchester Boulevard. This is architecture and site application S-0734, subdivision application M07-13. It requests approval to demolish a single-family residence built prior to 1941, as well as to demolish a 3,250-square-foot office building, merge the 2 existing parcels, and construct a new 15,510-square-foot office building on property zoned O. This is APN 424-27-011 and 051. Do we have a staff report, Mr. Suda?
Yes, and Mr. Banks will provide the staff report tonight.
Thank you, Chairman Kane, members of the Commission. This project consists of 2 parcels located at 15720 and 15736 Winchester Boulevard. The site is currently developed with an office building and a single-family home. The general plan designation of both parcels is office professional, and the zoning designation is office. Tonight, the applicant is proposing to combine the 2 parcels and demolish the structures on both sites in order to construct a new 15,510 square foot office building. The proposed building varies in height from 30 feet along Winchester Boulevard to 35 feet along the rear and side of the site, which slopes downward. Parking is provided in the back portion of the site, with 32 parking spaces located in a proposed parking garage and 34 spaces in a surface parking lot. The project requires architecture and site approval for new building. And while the building does meet the technical requirements contained in the zoning code, staff does have some concerns regarding the project, and I'll discuss those momentarily. As mentioned, the project does include the demolition of a single-family home that was constructed prior to 1941. This was reviewed by the Historic Preservation Committee at its meeting of June 20th of 2007. The committee did not feel the structure was architecturally significant and voted unanimously to recommend allowing its demolition to the Planning Commission. And the minutes of that meeting are attached to the staff report. As mentioned, the project does require architecture and site approval. In staff's opinion, this building would establish the character of the commercial area south of Pleasant View Avenue and serve as a gateway to the downtown area. Architecturally, staff finds the building to be well designed, but is concerned about the scale and mass in relation to the surrounding neighborhood. Page 4 of your staff report contains a summary of the buildings and lot sizes in the vicinity of the project site. The square footage of the building would be the largest in the immediate area. However, this would also be the largest lot in the area. But the floor area in relation to the lot size is also higher than the adjacent buildings. The Conceptual Development Advisory Committee reviewed this project and expressed concern to the applicant regarding the scale and mass of the project in relation to the neighborhood and suggested design changes. The minutes of those meetings were also included with the staff report. Staff has recommended design modifications to the applicant, and those recommendations were outlined in the staff report. The applicant notes in their letter of justification that the project meets the technical requirements for the zoning district, and that's correct. However, projects are also required to be compatible with the area in which it's located. The zoning code states in part that the purpose of architecture and site approval is to regulate the height, proportion, exterior construction, and design of buildings to ensure that they're architecturally compatible with their surroundings. The Commission, in order to approve a project, the Commission is required to find that the proposed building is compatible with the site and character of the neighborhood. And based on the present design, staff cannot recommend that the Commission make those required findings. Additionally, this evening, the applicant is requesting that the Planning Commission waive the requirement for story poles. The applicant requested the Community Development Director waive the requirement. The applicant felt that because the existing office building is occupied, that erecting story poles would be difficult and potentially dangerous to occupants and visitors of the site. In lieu of story poles, the applicant is providing a model for you to review. The Community Development Director did not waive the requirement for the story poles. The request is being forwarded to the Planning Commission. If the Planning Commission does not feel the model is sufficient to evaluate the scale and mass of the proposal, the Planning Commission may continue the item and direct the applicant to install the story poles. Because the project does generate more than 5 peak hour trips, projects are asked to provide community benefit. The applicant will address that with you verbally tonight and make their proposal. As part of the environmental analysis conducted for the project, there were several project-specific studies. A detailed traffic study was completed and concluded that when project volumes are adjusted for existing on-site traffic, that the proposed project would generate 125 new daily trips, with 18 new trips during the AM peak hour and 17 during the PM peak hour. The intersection currently operates at level of service B and would continue to operate at level of service B with the project. The traffic study also evaluated potential impacts to school-bound children that currently walk along Winchester Boulevard and Days Avenue during school peak hours. They concluded that the impact on school-related pedestrian safety would be less than significant. Their conclusion is based on the pedestrian counts taken during school and traffic peak hours, the project's estimated peak hour traffic volumes, and the project's less than significant impact on traffic congestion, signal delay, and intersection operations. Tree analysis was also completed. The project plans indicate that all the trees on the site would be removed. The arborist assessment indicates that the loss of all but 3 oak trees would conform with the town's regulation regarding the removal of trees. The 3 oak trees in question appear in good condition, and it's recommended that they be retained or relocated. And it's also recommended that new trees be installed to mitigate those being removed, and that landscape screening be reestablished along the northern boundary. Should the Commission approve the project, these recommendations are included in the recommended conditions of approval. The environmental analysis conducted for the project indicated that there would be no significant impacts associated with the project, with implementation of the recommended mitigation measures, and a mitigated negative declaration has been prepared for the project. So in conclusion, Staff does not recommend approval of the project as proposed. In staff's opinion, significant design modifications would be necessary to address the concerns regarding compatibility of the project with the neighborhood. Should the commission have concerns with the project, and if the applicant is willing to make changes to the project, the commission could continue the project with direction for redesign. If the applicant is not willing to consider design changes, staff recommends that the architecture and site application be denied. Should the commission wish to approve the application, recommended conditions of approval have been attached. There's also a desk item that's been placed on the dais. One is an email from a resident of the area, and the second is the community benefit policy. That concludes the staff report and could answer any questions the commission may have at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. Commissioners, I repeat what he said about the desk item. I overlooked it. I should have mentioned it sooner. We got community benefit, and we have an email from Mr. J. Friedman. Do we have questions of staff? Commissioner Sayoc.
Mr. Banks, thanks for your presentation tonight. I do have some questions about the story poles. Have there been projects that have come before us without the story pole requirement, without story poles being built?
Sure, I would defer to Mr. Suda to answer that portion.
The one that immediately comes to mind is the Savano project, where they brought in flow simulations. And in the past on residential projects that have a number of different models, such as the Villa Felice project, the applicant has been required to put up story poles of each of the specific models, but not all 33 of the homes.
I suppose, Mr. Chair, if that's okay, just to follow up to that, I am concerned about the story poles not being put up. And the reason, to me, the story poles prevent a story, they tell us a story not only for those of us here tonight, but also those in the public that are driving past the site that aren't necessarily in the notification radius. Is the notification radius for this project still 300 feet? Or did you widen it because the story poles were not put up?
The notification was the standard contained in the zoning code.
Okay. Well, I can save my comments for commission matters, but I'll just be very upfront. This is a strong concern of mine. We've seen a case most recently on Englewood where someone not in the notification radius saw the orange netting, inquired within the town, and made their comments. And so this is a very large building on a very prominent site. So I think it would be a great disservice if we don't have that orange netting up to tell the public that something is going to be built here. You should come to downtown and figure out what it is and make your comments be known. And I think it would be a disservice if we don't provide a forum for those people to come to. So I'll just throw that out there. I'd like to hear what my other commissioners have to say.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bourgeois, you had your hand up?
Sure. I have a couple questions for Mr. Banks on traffic. If I understand the plans correctly, the only ingress and egress is going to be on Winchester at the Daves Avenue light?
That's correct, and that light would have to be relocated, be a matter of several feet, but it would have to be relocated south due to the new driveway.
And the level of service in the traffic report is only for that intersection. It doesn't, did they wrap around and take into account Farley, coming into, because, that's how I got to the site. I didn't come down Winchester. It seems like Farley is going to be, people turning off of Farley is going to be impacted.
Have to double check the traffic study, but I believe it was the one intersection.
So when they say level of service B to level of service B, it's for the Winchester Daves Avenue intersection.
Right. Correct. Which would be the most impacted intersection.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Going back to the story poles for just one moment, when the applicant gave the reason why they did not want to use story poles, what did the staff say? In other words, I think it generally is our policy that you would use story poles. Was there any concession, or what did the staff say? I want to make sure that when we hear from the applicant, we know the full story from your side, too. What did the staff tell the applicant, if at all, on the story pole issue?
I believe what the director indicated is that it's the story pole requirement is a standard requirement of the town. There is a provision that allows for waivers of the story pole requirement under certain situations, difficulty of erecting the story poles, and the provision of alternate visualization means, such as a model. Mr. Lortz wasn't comfortable approving it at the director's level, which is authorized under the council's policy, and informed the applicant that this is something he could approach the commission on and raise that issue with the commission. Did tell the applicant that the commission has the right to require that the story pole, direct that the story poles be put up, and that's the commission's prerogative.
Let me go to Commissioner Rice. You had your hand up earlier.
I'm going to ask for if I can get a brief description. First of all, I'll echo what Commissioner Sayoc said. I think story poles here are going to be very important before we get too deep into this. But the question I have is, over the last 14 months, from the time that I remember seeing this at the Conceptual Development Advisory Committee, what has transpired, if you can do a thumbnail 30-second briefing of what has happened, other than we lost 1,000 square feet of size to the building and a few more parking spaces, but that's all I really see that's changed.
That's correct. That's basically what has been changed. They made some technical modifications to address some concerns of parking on the ramp leading down, and made some slight modifications to the building size, but basically this is the same proposal that was reviewed by the Conceptual Development Advisory Committee.
Thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner O'Donnell.
I just want to follow up on that question. I'm wondering whether the staff advised the applicant that since staff did not waive the story pole requirement, and since it was pointed out that we might not either, and since the public speaking to the issue was triggered in many cases by the story pole, was any discussion had that this whole hearing this evening might have to be continued if the story poles were held as being necessary by the Planning Commission?
And Mr. Lortz indicated if the commission obviously directs that the poles be put up, then the commission would not be taking action tonight. Excuse me.
Thank you. Other questions? I'm going to open the public hearing, beginning with the applicant, Mr. John Lean, who will have up to 5 minutes to speak. After any other public members wish to speak, the applicant may then have 3 minutes for rebuttal. If there are members of the public who wish to speak on this matter after the applicant, please turn in a speaker card. You will each have up to 3 minutes to speak. I now call Mr. Lean or his representative.
Thank you. John Lean, 196 College Avenue. I'm the architect for the project. I have a desk item for you, and I'd appreciate it if you would not start the clock until I gave each of you a copy of this, because it is the document that I will refer to in my opening remarks.
Mr. Parsons has turned off the clock. You may do so.
As described to you by staff.
Excuse me, Mr. Lean, one sec. Mr. Parsons, is there a way to get this on the overhead so the public can see it? Let's do that.
As described by staff, all those properties north of this application all the way to Lark Avenue are now general planned low-density residential. Those to the south of the property, including the subject property, are down to Shelburne Way, I believe, are general plan designated office professional. And I've prepared this document because I want to focus on what I think is the most important consideration before you, and an apparent sense of sensitivity in staff and discussions I've had with staff, and that is whether or not this building provides a proper interface between those residentially designated properties to the north and this, the first of the office professional uses, to the south. And if you'll follow along with me, I have highlighted the points that I'm going to discuss, and if we could just start at the upper right-hand corner, I'm going to describe to you those items which I think are evidence of the sensitivity we have brought to this project in recognition of the importance of its interface to the residential properties, and also the importance of this location as defined by the general plan as establishing a landmark, a gateway building as one enters the downtown. So it needs to do those two things. It needs to be sensitive to the interface with residential. It also needs to bookend the beginning of the downtown as you enter it, and act as a gateway building. They may seem to be at odds with one another, but I'm going to describe to you how I think it addresses those issues. In the upper right-hand corner, I show the three different setbacks from our southerly property line. We're required to have 25 feet. We have 27 feet. That 27 feet is to the one-story open arcade element that stretches almost all the way across the front of the building. So the required front setback is 25. We are providing 27 to the one-story portion, and then 35 feet total to the second-story portion. Directly below that, you'll see we have a 59-foot side setback between us and the existing office building. 10 is required. Below that, in the yellow circle, is a 90-foot dimension. That is the length of the 8-foot deep covered arcade, done in a very traditional style, provide obvious circulation to anyone using the building and understanding how to use the building, and cast deep shadows onto the wall behind, and it itself is also a one-story element. Directly below that, and I think this might be the most important consideration in terms of our interface with the residential, there's a 21-foot dimension, and the highlighted box says one-story gabled roof element. It's an iconic residential form. I want you to move it a little bit. Right there, yes. And it is closest to our residential interface. And below that, I'm pointing out, once again, the required and the proposed setbacks of the building from the street. We're required to have 25 feet. Our one-story setback is actually almost 40 feet, or 38 feet, 37 foot 9 inches, and that's because we're not parallel to the front property line, which I think is a real advantage to us in that as we move closer to the residential interface, the front of the building gets farther from the street. Not only is it 37 9 inches from the front property line, it's a total of 57 feet from the curb line in Winchester Boulevard. And without going through the other ones, at the very bottom it says front setback existing home is 29 feet, and that's represented by the black rectangle. And you can see that existing home actually is closer to the street than this building. So as you come south on Winchester, the building will be not revealed immediately and not especially prominent on the site. Finally, in the lower left-hand corner, again, in deference to our interface with residential, we have 66 cars on the site. In the lower left-hand corner, I'm pointing out that 5 of those cars, only 5 of those cars, actually abut the residential use to the north of us. And in the upper left-hand corner, I'm pointing out, because of the topography of the property and the fact that half of these cars are in an enclosed garage, because of that, you will not see any parking from Winchester Boulevard as you pass the building, and I think that's especially important to the quality, the visual quality of a building. Thank you very much. I would You know there's a model in front of you, and I hope in the question-answer period, we have an opportunity to discuss that in detail.
Thank you, Mr. Lean. First card I have is, oh, please forgive me. Do the commissioners have any questions of Mr. Lean? Commissioner Bourgeois.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Lean. I'm just a little confused reconciling this with the model. And when you say that second-story setback is further than the front story, isn't there a two-story element that comes out?
You can see it there, facing, it's turned towards you, and that's indicating the ceremonial entrance to this building, which will actually be rarely used, but I think it's important, whether it's a single-family home and the door faces the street, makes the entrance obvious. It's also important in a use like this to make it clear as a welcoming sign, this is where you go in. The fact of the matter is, there's no parking except a few along the street, and as a result, very few people will actually enter at that location. But visually, it announces that this is where you would come into the building.
Architecturally, I understand the element. I just want to make sure that the setback that you're showing here is actually, the second-story setback is to that recessed main wall and not to that element.
Which dimension are you referring to, or can you point it out to me?
When you have, down at the bottom, when you have proposed two-story setback, and you draw the line, you're coming all the way back. You're not coming out to that entry element.
That's right. That one portion would be above and protruding slightly forward of the one-story arcade that lines the front of the building.
Thank you.
Other questions for the applicant? Commissioner Sayoc.
Mr. Lean, have you had any meetings with neighboring residents? And if so, can you just describe to us some of the larger issues that were discussed?
We have, my client is notified the immediate neighbors, let them know that we have this project in the works. If they'd like to discuss it with us, we'd be willing to do that. They were not. We had no response. And I'm just speaking probably not 300 feet, but the property owner is immediately adjacent to the project.
Other questions from the commission? Mr. Lean, thank you. After the public has spoken, you'll be called back for a 3-minute rebuttal if you choose to give us one.
And as I say, I hope we have an opportunity to discuss the model. Thanks very much.
I have a number of speaker cards, so what I'd like to do is to try and call folks up 3 at a time. If you'd sit in the first row, after the other speaker is finished, just come up to the mic and tell us who you are. My first card is David Simon. All right. Followed by Richard Whitaker, followed by Doug McNeil. Mr. Simon.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My wife and I purchased a home at 15680 Winchester Boulevard probably about a year ago. We're first-time homeowners, so for us this is new. Quite frankly, we don't know what we don't know, and I'm hoping that the commission will protect us. But what I'd like to do is to express a number of concerns that range from short-term inconveniences to potential long-term financially devastating implications. So let me just start out with the short-term and I'll increase in severity. Short-term considerations are, we have concerns about the noise of construction. We have two children under the age of 3.5. Naps are involved. So to the extent that there is ongoing construction with loud beeping and digging of parking garages, we're concerned about the impact on our lifestyle and on our ability to run our household. We're also concerned about parking across from our home at 15680 Winchester during construction. There's a strip on Winchester Boulevard that contractors seem to like to use for the purpose of parking. Just sort of a minor inconvenience in that it's an eyesore. As I get into, I guess, the longer range potential impacts of the project, I'm particularly concerned about the excavation of land associated with the parking garage and what that means in terms of rodent displacement. I think that goes beyond a minor inconvenience to the extent that we have mice, snakes, etc. in our yard and potentially entering our home. That is not practical. What I'm really concerned about is the impact of a project of this scale and mass on our property value. When we decided to buy a home in Los Gatos, we looked at towns like Los Altos, Palo Alto, et cetera, and we chose Los Gatos for a variety of reasons, but one of the major reasons was because we thought that other than the school district, we thought that the investment that potential was strong. We felt pretty good that we would receive a return on a material investment of our liquid net worth. So as a recent home buyer, I'm sure you can appreciate, given the acceleration of home prices over the past 10 years, in order to buy a home in Los Gatos, you're talking about a material amount of money. My concern would be, I don't know what I don't know, as I said earlier. I'm not sure what the impact of a project of this mass and scale does to surrounding home values. So I would just ask for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. Any questions for the speaker? Commissioner Rice.
Mr. Simon, thank you. Had you seen this model before?
I have not. In fact, the first that I had heard of this project was a card that I'd received in the mail about this big somewhere about 2 weeks ago.
Okay. Are you familiar with story polls and how they work?
Not at all. I've never heard of a story poll until tonight.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Commissioner Bourgeois.
Mr. Simon?
Sir, I'm sorry. One more question for you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to understand where exactly you live. So going, are you next door?
Probably
Or are you-
about 4 or 5 houses north on the same side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions for the speaker? Thank you. Mr. Whitaker.
Thank you. I appreciate all you've done in your research. You answered a few questions that I had concerns over earlier, so I won't have to review those. But my credentials are, yes, I live in the affected zone, and I did get one of the postcards in the mail. And I was shocked when I took the time to come down to planning a couple of days ago, and Curtis Banks was nice enough to provide me with a stack of drawings and letters and so on the project. And one of the questions I had was regarding the noise levels which will be generated. 32 cars underneath and 32 cars outside, 64 cars. And with all our cleverness in Electron Valley here, we've got the little key clickers that make your horn go off every time you get in your car and every time you get out of it. And usually it's done at all hours, night, morning, doesn't matter. Also the alarms that go off that are vibration sensitive. And as the garbage trucks back up in your neighborhood, my neighborhood, our neighborhood, these alarms go off. And thanks to the regulations in Los Gatos not being quite as strict as in Montecito, your garbage trucks are allowed to pick up in the industrial and commercial zones between 2 in the morning and 6 or 8 or whatever time you want to do it. And it wakes us up quite often, and then so on and so on. I have 2 more letters here, 2 of my immediate neighbors on Pleasant View, which will also look down on the site or up to the site. We're not sure yet. There's a height problem there. That are not present tonight, but asked me to turn in their information. And the first one is David McMacken, and he's 2 doors down from me on Pleasant View, same side. The other one is my immediate next door neighbor, Terry Rainey. One other item is you approved the storage lockers after modifying those plans, and they still have not complied. The storage lockers I'm talking about are the ones behind where it says existing storage building. I'm not sure that's the exact one, but there's another one in there too. There are two storage facilities. We currently have an unrestricted view of the top of the storage locker full of galvanized ducting, air conditioner units, and so on, with no replanting of oak trees that they said they would do, and so on. So all I'm saying is, the plans look great. It looks way too large for the neighborhood, and
Thank you, Mr. Whitaker.
we're tired. Thank you.
Next up, I'm sorry, questions for the speaker?
The applicant indicated that they attempted to get meetings with the, I got it on. They attempted to get meetings with the neighbors. Were you ever contacted?
No, all I got was this, and when I took the time to come down here on Monday, they gave us 3 days to view the project. I never saw the model before. I only saw a stack of plans, which I went through. It took about 2 hours, and I spent considerable time. Then I went around knocking on doors saying, hey, are you guys aware of this? And most of the people that are here tonight, or several of them, were not aware of it, so or of the scope of it, because there were no poles allowed. And the comment about the cost of living that Dave made a minute ago, my house in Los Gatos in 1957, which my parents owned, I had to leave after I graduated from high school here in 1957, and was not able to afford to come back until about 14 years ago. So I know what, it's nice to have a home instead of a giant office building.
Other questions for the speaker? Thank you, Mr. Whitaker. Mr. McNeil will be followed by Brian Mekachuk and Robert Karski and Paul Lakovic. Mr. McNeil.
Good evening. Doug McNeil, 17413 Pleasant View Avenue. I didn't receive a card or was not contacted by the applicant regarding the development of this property. I would like to compliment Curtis Banks for the excellent report and the time he spent with me yesterday to explain what the development was about and to understand the impacts to our community. Yesterday, I carefully read the applicant's proposal, along with comments from the Historic Preservation Committee, the Development Advisory Committee, and Planning Staff report in detail. Also pleased to read the Cannon Design Group, the city's contract architect, who concurred with the concerns regarding the scope and scale of the project. As a resident of Pleasant View Avenue, I'd like to go on record to concur with the staff's recommendation to deny the approval. The applicant's lack of willingness to install story poles clearly indicates they understand the sensitive nature of the size of this development. Other developments of this scale adjacent to our neighborhood in the industrial area tried this approach before and did not succeed in getting approval and had to downsize after repeated meetings and commission sessions. Without viewing renderings and or models, one can easily ascertain the scale and proportion of the project by simply calculating the comparative scale to the adjacent structures appropriate where there's appropriate land use. On average, the proposed square footage is 7 times that of the 8 structures found along this corridor. If you added the square footage of all structures of these 8 properties to the proposed structure, it would equal the combined square footage for all the existing current properties combined. If you compare the average roof elevations of all the structures, the proposed structure is 1.9 times the adjacent structures. If you compare the average ratio of square footage to the height of the proposed structure, it would be equal to 14 times the volumetric ratio of the existing structures. So it's clear to me, as a member of the community and a resident on Pleasant View Avenue, we're required by a city ordinance in the town of Montessorino to put up story poles. On this particular action, I would understand that this would be a continuance, a lack of willingness to follow policy, and that this should be continued or basically denied. So I'd like to go on record as a resident for the town, for Pleasant View Avenue, concur with staff's recommendation to deny approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me see if there's any questions. Any questions for the speaker? Thank you very much. Mr. Mekachuk?
Good evening. My name is Brian Mekachuk. I live at 17509 Via Sereno in Monte Sereno. I live across the street on Winchester, so I'm on the corner lot. I've lived there since 1997 with my wife and my 2 children. I've got a 9-year-old boy in Los Gatos Little League and my 4-year-old daughter. I was involved in the light that went into the intersection of Daves and Winchester, and if you drive by, you'll see that it's Monte Sereno and Los Gatos. It's a real community that we've got there. The gentleman that was speaking on behalf of the applicant, he spoke to Los Gatos. But you know, on the west side of Winchester, it's all Monte Sereno. And I think that you don't want to ignore the folks in Monte Sereno. We feel part of Los Gatos, and it's very important to us. This whole project has gone along in stealth mode. I'm just absolutely surprised. I got the card in the mail within hours. I got an email from some folks that are in the room here saying, you know, do you know anything about this? We always understand what's going on in our community, and I'm just shocked that there's no story poles go up. When you mentioned the importance of story poles, you're absolutely dead on, because they signify not only the mass of the structure, but something's going to happen. There's a development going on. All of a sudden, the people get interested. If you're driving down Daves Ave eastbound and you see story poles going up, there's going to be a lot of people that go, wow, what's going on with that? You know, it's all in stealth mode. In any event, I think you understand that. I ask that you deny the application because it is completely out of scope for the neighborhood. Granted, you may call it an entrance to Los Gatos, but you've got that on the other side of 85 with the Netflix project. I'm concerned with the trees in Monte Sereno. We've actually had houses that have to have the foundation conform so that the trees can be allowed to stay. And that's right across the street that was had. The other thing that I think is very important is in terms of the setbacks and all the dimensions. Granted, it does fit that. But, you know, think of the mass that you're adding to the building by combining the 2 lots. Okay? What you're doing there is you're taking 20 feet of building and you're adding that immediately. And I almost wonder to myself, why isn't this in 2 components? First of all, the subdivision or the merger of the 2 lots, and then dealing with the building. It's all in one, and that's okay. I just will put my faith in the Planning Commission. The other thing I would like to say is I read the staff report, and it was fabulous, so I compliment Curtis on that.
Thank you. Any questions for the speaker? Thank you, sir. Mr. Karski?
I am Bob Karski, and I live with my wife Barbara on 17576 Via Sereno. I've been in the area just a little less than 3 years, and when we moved into the area, part of the importance of our location was the character of the site. And almost everywhere we would look on from Winchester or from our street was low-profile residential or low-profile office buildings. And we felt that that kind of character really justified our buying into the area and kind of helped us make that kind of decision, which will probably be our last house in the Monte Sereno area. The first I had learned about the structure is from Brian, who just spoke on this last weekend. I had no idea it was being built, and I think part of the reason for that was no story poles. I certainly would have been aware much sooner if that had been the case. My immediate reaction to it is the scope and the size and the character of it being so out of step with the rest of the area. It doesn't seem to fit either the character of existing office buildings or existing residences, and I think the the size would completely change the character of the neighborhood. I did go through trying to understand as much as I could about the property and the issues from this report, and I do appreciate all the work that really went into it. And that gave me the impetus, I think, to really speak up here and really recommend that this application be denied. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for the speaker? Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Paul Lakovic. I live at 175.
Excuse me, Mr. Lakovic. I want to just line up some more folks. Following Mr. Lakovic, Ms. Marentes and Ms. Lakovic and John McLaren. Would you come down and be ready? Thank you, sir.
Sorry about that. My name is Paul Lakovic. I live at 17541 Daves Avenue. My house is not shown here because Daves Avenue isn't shown but I'm right on the corner of Daves Avenue in Winchester. So directly, if you look straight out, that's my house. Okay, turn right on Daves, turn right into the driveway, that's my house. I was born and raised in Los Gatos, went to Blossom Hill, went to Fisher, straight off to Bellarmine, but have moved back here, live in Monte Sereno now for 7 years. Have a daughter that's going to be going to Daves Avenue kindergarten next year. So I have read through everything that the staff's put together. I do compliment them, and it's very comprehensive. I don't want to cover common ground that's always been covered now, but I do support staff's recommendation to deny the application based on what we've seen so far. My main concern for me is retaining residential character of the neighborhood. Putting in all of the commercial on top of what's already there, while it might be up to code, it's not necessarily up to the best nature of the neighborhood. Concern, of course, with the scale of the project. It's huge. It's massive. Don't need to cover that. And then, obviously, if the application gets continued, do need to see story poles so when you're coming down Daves Avenue, you can see what's going on. So that is what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Questions for the speaker? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Marentes.
I disagree with,
Mr. Parsons.
I am Minerva Marentes. I live in 17574 Daves Avenue, and I disagree with the project they have. I live 40 years in my house in Daves Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions for the speaker? Ms. Lakovic.
Good evening. Thank you for the forum. First, I'd like to say thank you very much to the city for at least letting us have this voice. I apologize. I'm kind of nervous. I live at 1754 Daves Avenue, and that actually on here is right here. So my property actually is on the corner of Daves and Winchester. My front door will look at this particular structure, which is for the first time seeing it right now. As far as being stealth on this project, we were on vacation in Disneyland with my 5-year-old last week. Get a message on our Trio, did we know about this project? Guaranteed you it ruined the rest of our vacation when we heard about it. We did not receive any invites to come speak to the developer. We did not receive anything until we came home and saw that we did get a postcard postmarked by the city, delivered late. So just hearing about it from that particular aspect and hearing all of the different things up till now about the story poles, about the size of the project, about how it would impact that corner that we worked so hard with about 2 years ago to calm the traffic down because of the school traffic, because children walking in that corner, because of us walking from there to Vasona Park. And to find out that after all that, it's a losing battle. That neighborhood is a residential neighborhood, and mind you, we moved there because it is a combination of business and residential and you have to have that if you want to be the proximity to downtown. So we don't have anything about businesses going in. We don't have an issue with that. We have an issue with the size of that structure. I voice being young homeowners. We bought that house 7 years ago as is. That corner we have worked with our own hands to improve. And if you were to drive by there now versus what it was before, you'd probably say that we have improved that visually. And I know that the builder did a beautiful job on the structure that already exists in Los Gatos. I think it's wonderful. I just think that the proportion of that structure, unless of course he plans to keep it to that size, is out of proportion to our neighborhood. As far as being notified to speak to the developer, we've never received that letter, and I'm assuming that we're closer than 300 feet to the building. So I'd like to be a part of that. In conclusion, I would just really like the city to consider what is more important. That lot is huge, and does it really need to be combined for this one large structure? Could it not be half residential, half building? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the speaker? Thank you. Mr. McLaren. Mr. McLaren will be followed by Kel Marchbank, Diane Lindecker, and Laura Lindecker, if you'd come on down. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Just for the record, I may be responsible for ruining of that vacation. It could have been my email that triggered those emotions, so I'll take full credit for that. Anyway, my name is John McLaren. I live at 17560 Daves Avenue. I am across the street from the Lackavics, so I would be on the south side of Daves and the second home from the intersection of Winchester. It's a two-story home. It's a home that's over 100 years old. It's the original Daves Avenue family home. Which I say only because we bought into that neighborhood because of the character of the home itself and the character of the surrounding neighborhood. And that is the single most thing we would like to see preserved going forward. That said, I agree with everything that I've heard tonight from folks from the community who have spoken as well as staff. I think you know where my interests lie in terms of recommendations. I'd like to see the plan as proposed not go forward as is. There are a couple points that I would like to reiterate so as not to rehash everything we've heard tonight. First is, again, size, scope, character of the proposed building for my taste and interest is simply too large. For perspective, if you were to drive by the area and look at the adjacent properties, commercial building to the south, residential to the north, this proposed property is over 50% higher than the property to the south, and perhaps 2 to 3 times the height of the property to the north. Massive in scale and size, and I think simply put, not befitting the character of the neighborhood. Secondly, I'd like to point out that 4 of my rooms look directly out onto that lot and the view shed beyond, and my views would absolutely unequivocally be compromised by that size, stature, and posture of a building in that location. So just for the record, I'd like to state that. A couple other points to hit on. I have traffic concerns, but I won't go into that because I know there's a report. I live with the traffic on Daves every day. I see how it backs up at peak hours near the school. I think there's been implications with that the commissioners may be aware of. But beyond the traffic concern, the story poles, I have a strong concern with that. I think that, again, the folks that I've spoken to that live up Daves Avenue is a gateway to an entire community. Everyone that I've spoken to who knew nothing about this project, when I described the size and scope comparatively to the adjacent buildings, everyone that lives up that street that I've spoke with couldn't understand why it wasn't on their radar screen, why they didn't have an understanding of what was going on, and expressed the same concern about the size, scope, and magnitude of such a structure that is the entrance to their community, where they live, where they travel in and out every day. That said, I'd just like to comment on 2 points that Mr. Lean made. The first is, as I think was mentioned before, we received no notification whatsoever from the applicant in terms of willingness to discuss this project with us. This first hit my radar screen with the postcard. Lastly, if I may, I would just like to point out that while he described the setback parameters on the overhead here, I think the point that has escaped us all is the view from Daves Avenue as you're traveling up and down that street. This proposed property in direct sight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the speaker? Thank you, sir.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Kel Marchbank. Did I say that correctly?
Kel Marchbank here. Yeah, that's right, Kel Marchbank, 17530 Farley Road West. And so I'm on the south side of it, of the large building there. And just one thing, nice job over there. Thanks for the story poll notification. I also received the postcard, but nothing from the builder or the developers. And I do see the building from my house, my front door, rooms in my house, and the story poles would have been nice. I think we're probably getting off to a bad start here. I know something's got to be built there because it's pretty dilapidated, but being a little bit on the sneaky side, I think, with no real postcards and side poles. So that's all.
Thank you. Any questions for the speaker? Thank you very much. Diane Lindecker.
My name is Laura Lindecker, and I'm speaking on behalf of Phil and Diane Lindecker. Diane has a sore throat. I'm their daughter. I'm a Los Gatos resident today and used to live in their house at 17640 Daves Avenue. They're the sixth house on the left as you're coming up from Winchester. They can see the red light of the stoplight from in front of their house. They deny the application. They were not given any postcard. We just received word of this 2 nights ago from one of our neighbors, and we have spoken to other neighbors as well. In fact, the neighbors right across from Green Thumb on Winchester wanted us to relay their disapproval as well. This project would definitely be in sight as you're driving from their house. Being real estate agents with Coldwell Banker in Los Gatos, both myself and Diane Lindecker, we know for a fact this will affect property values on Daves Avenue and Winchester and the surrounding areas. So I want that to be taken into consideration. Further, all this effort was put into putting these stoplights up to protect the children at Daves Avenue Elementary. What consideration has been given now to this new pattern of traffic congestion we're going to have, especially with an entrance on Winchester? Perhaps there's some other way that it can be entered off of Winchester, so we're concerned about that. And lastly, like everyone has said, we feel it's a very poor fit for the community in terms of the size and the look and the height of that building. And obviously, as everyone has said, without story poles, clearly the people involved in this development knew there would be discontent among the neighbors and tried to get as far as they've gotten without doing story poles and letting people know about it. And here we all are towards the last minute trying to scramble to come up with a better compromise for our communities. Thank you for your consideration.
Any questions for the speaker? Thank you very much. Will Diane be speaking? Come say that to the mic, for the record.
I'm totally in agreement with my daughter. I am also a real estate agent with Coldwell Banker in Los Gatos, and I do know that this will affect, in a very negative fashion, the property value of our homes, and it really is very disconcerting for my husband and myself. Also, in going outside of my front door, I will be able to see this tall structure, and it's just very inappropriate for our neighborhood community to have such a tall and large structure, such as what they are proposing. So that's about it.
Any questions for the speaker? Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Next call, Jean Rajabzuda. Did I say that correctly?
No, but that's all right. It's common. It's for Job City. Thank you. And I live at 15701 Cabin Lane, and with my husband for the past 10 years, and we have 2 boys that went to Daves Avenue, Fisher, and Los Gatos. And the reason why we have picked that neighborhood is because of the beautiful mature trees, the neighborhood, and being the close access to Daves Avenue School. And when we moved in, there was the Green Thumb nursery, which I found very charming, and a couple other businesses right there, which were kind of, you don't really notice them, so they're not. I don't feel an impact on the neighborhood, but I feel that this is really a residential community, and you take Daves Avenue to get to Montecito, Twin Creeks area. I'm also a real estate agent with Coldwell Banker here in Los Gatos, and I think it would definitely affect the home values in the neighborhood. I do understand that the owner of the property would build something there that is a commercial venture because you would not want to have a house there, but I feel the structure that he proposes is completely out of scale with the rest of the neighborhood and would be out of character and bring down the home values. And I ask that this be denied. Thank you.
Any questions for the speaker? Thank you very much. Commissioners, I'm going to pass down two letters that were turned in earlier, one from a Terry Rain and one from a David Mackin, neither in support of the project. I have a speaker card for Joe Dermer. Mr. Dermer, you are the project owner, and I'm wondering if you'd like to use the rebuttal time to speak to us, or then hurry and do so.
Chairman Kane, definite improvement tonight, okay? So, hooray for you, all right? But I want to say, maybe it's a good thing the story poles didn't go up. Otherwise, we'd have standing room only tonight. What a crowd! Wow! You know, I speak as a community advocate, okay? And I look at this model that's supposed to take the place of story pole. I can't believe it. The model sits by itself. It has no relationship to the neighborhood. The story poles go up, and the neighborhood is there, and everybody that goes by can see the relationship of height, bulk, and mass to the existing neighborhood architecture. That's it in a nutshell. And to let one person out of the standard requirement sets an outrageous, ugly precedent for the community. So I would urge you not to do it, not in the public interest. Sorry, Martin, I couldn't do any better. Okay? That's somebody in the audience on TV watching. Okay? That's it. Thank you. Excuse me. You know, for one, I can't make up my mind how bad it is until you do the story polls. And then, if you continue it, I will be able to give you my personal judgment.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Davis. I have a card from Mr. Dermer, who's the project owner. Mr. Lean, how do you want to proceed? Is this part of the rebuttal?
This isn't a rebuttal, this is really a clarification. Is it okay if I speak now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to talk from the building owner's side. My name is Joe Dermer, and I'm actually not the building owner. The building owner is my father, Martin Dermer. And as I was sitting here listening to all of your concerns tonight...
Mr. Dermer, I'm going to ask you one favor. If you would address your remarks to the Planning Commission, please.
You mean you'd like me to look at the Planning Commission?
Yes.
Okay. The clarification I'd like to make is, first of all, regarding the issue of story poles. Like Mr. Simon, I believe, who spoke first, I didn't know what a story pole was either before this, and I think that if we understood how important that was to the community, we would have done so. A lot of times, you know, with government processes and things, the community thinks there's something nefarious or stealthy or sneaking going on. There really isn't an attempt to bring this thing under the radar screen, and I have to discuss that point with our architect, but I wanted to say to the community that there wasn't an intent to deceive the community, and we feel that we're still, far enough away in terms of starting any kind of project at that location that the story poles, would not be necessary prior to this meeting. The other thing is the cards are not sent out, point of clarification, by the project owner, but by the town. And so if those were late getting out, I think the town ought to take responsibility for that aspect of it. I'm a member of the community just like everyone here in the audience. I went to Van Meter Elementary School, Fisher Junior High School, and Los Gatos High School. And it's our desire to make something nice out of this location. Anybody who drives down Daves Avenue toward Winchester certainly will attest to the fact that they've been looking at a blighted property for some time, and that's the single-family dwelling at 15736 Winchester. Nobody wants to live there. It's not a residence that's fit for anybody between two office buildings. We'd like to make something nice out of it that fits the neighborhood and enhances property values, not detracts from property values. Like the gentleman indicated who lives up on Pleasant View, he looks down on a storage locker of galvanized steel roofing. That's not what we're proposing here. We want a very, very attractive building, and if anyone has a chance to look at another building that Mr. Lean has designed and built on Los Gatos Boulevard at Raid Avenue, I would encourage them to do that. Lastly, I'd like to apologize. A point of clarification, Mr. Lean indicated we had contacted neighbors. We have not contacted any neighbors. We didn't think we were at that point in the process yet where we would have to contact
Thank you,
anybody.
Mr. Donor.
And we will discuss it with the community and with the neighbors as soon as that time is appropriate.
Thank you. Any questions for the speaker? Commissioner Bourgeois.
Thank you. So I understand you're not the owner. Are you authorized to speak on his behalf?
I'm not a majority owner. I have a very small partnership interest in the property. I'm authorized to speak on behalf of the owner. He's my father.
Great, thank you. I take it you've read the staff report?
Yes, I have.
And there are suggestions of, or the recommendations of breaking the project into smaller structures to be more, neighborhood friendly and to step the building into the hillside. Are you prepared to consider such a significant redesign?
I don't think that answer can be yes or no. First, the building that's next door to the south is virtually the same height as what we're proposing. That's the Mala building, the two-story Redwood building. We're proposing to go no higher than that, and the building higher at the back end will not be visible from Winchester Boulevard. Now, there is a problem, in my view, with making it into smaller structures, and the main problem is that you're going to lose quite a bit of efficiency. I mean, I understand the objections regarding the scale of the project, but the worst thing you can have is a lot of cars running around blowing exhaust all over the place. You're better off putting everybody on a bus. And we want to build a very green building. We want to put solar on the roof. If you have a lot of individual structures, all running separate heating, ventilating, and air conditioning systems, you're going to lose that efficiency. And so we feel that, from the front, with all of the reliefs and so forth, that it creates a very attractive building and one that will be efficient. The overall footprint of the building is only about 27% of the lot size, and so I think it's about 8 or 9,000 square feet on the bottom. The rest is all on the upper floor. I hope I answered your question.
Commissioner Bourgeois, you have a follow-up?
Well, I heard a no. That's what I heard. Is that?
Well,
is
the
that-
answer is, I don't think that a redesign into a number of smaller structures is going to be economically feasible.
Thank you.
Other questions for the speaker? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Lean, you have 3 minutes to offer us a rebuttal.
I'm not up to that. Let me just say, property is general planned, office professional, has been for a number of years. It's zoned, office professional. This didn't just happen overnight. People smarter than me decided that was the proper thing to do. General plan strongly encourages gateway buildings as people enter our town, so it's obvious that you are entering a special place. In my opinion, this building will be every bit as well loved as the one I did on Highway 9. And finally, I would say, town's peer review architect says this is a very well-designed building with good overall form. Arguably one of the better proposals he has reviewed for Los Gatos, and that he would not venture to suggest what changes might be made to make it better. I appreciate your consideration.
Mr. Lean, let me address that. Town architect said he wouldn't do it because you were fully talented and capable to do so yourself. Is that
I'm
not
sorry,
true?
could you repeat that?
Yeah, I was reading his letter that you just quoted, and the town architect said that he wouldn't suggest what changes you should make because the architect is talented and fully capable of designing to that direction. He was complimenting you, not really refusing the assignment.
Well, you left out the word venture. In other words, I take that to mean he wouldn't know where to start.
All right, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Commissioners, I have a suggestion. Let me see if you find it acceptable. In the staff... Oh, I'm so sorry. Commissioners, do you have questions of Mr. Lean? Commissioner Bourgeois.
I have a couple of questions. First of all, I'd like to address the same question I gave the last speaker, is the redesign suggestions that staff has made. I'm hearing that you're not willing or interested in going in that direction.
That's correct.
Thank you. Community benefit, we never got to that. So we were told that there has to be a community benefit on this project and that the applicant will come forward with something tonight, and I haven't heard anything yet. So maybe you could speak to that.
The applicant's position is they have operated this business at this location for 33 years, provided professional services to this community. They would like to continue to do this, and this building would facilitate that. And in addition, they provide services to a number of people in our community who are pro bono services, I should say, that people who are developmentally disabled, and they like to be able to continue to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Richichi.
One of the reasons given for lack of story poles was that it would be difficult and potentially dangerous. Would you comment on the potentially dangerous aspect of it?
If you think about it, their existing office building is set well back on the property, has a parking lot between the building and the street. It's what's called a double-loaded parking lot, which is to say an aisle down the middle and a 20-foot parking space to the right and left of that aisle. And that results in about a 65-foot span that the story pole would have to cover to cross that parking lot. Difficult to do without supports, and the supports would certainly present a hazard in our opinion.
Is there any alternative to showing the bulk of mass without, could you put it on the existing building?
On site, I'm not saying it can't be done, and I have a pretty distinct impression that it ought to be done. As to how we do that, I don't have an answer.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for the speaker? Thank you, Mr. Lean. I have no cards. I'm going to close the public hearing. Propose a suggestion of the commissioners to see if they find that acceptable. In the staff report, it says if the commission does not feel the model is sufficient to evaluate the scale and mass of the proposal, the item should be continued and the applicant directed to install story poles. I'm thinking we've heard a lot about story poles tonight. I'm wondering if we could get a consensus to do just that, to send the project back for the story poles. Commissioner Machici.
I would have been inclined to do so. It's on. But what I heard was that if I were to continue this, I would want to take some of the staff suggestions that I heard refused. I'm saying, why are we going to waste any time? My tendency right now would be, because of that refusal, is to go right to a denial.
Thank you. Other discussion? Commissioner Sayak.
I would echo Commissioner Machici's concerns. The applicant has clearly said that they do not plan to redesign, and so I don't feel the need to move this to a date certain if we know the outcome of that meeting.
All right, then I think I will not succeed in getting a consensus on the story poles, in which case I'll turn to you for a discussion or a motion.
I have a question of
Yes,
staff,
sir.
though. Are the two items to be treated separately, the lot subdivision? Is that something that, it appears like we're denying the architectural aspect of it. Does that follow that we deny the lot division?
Well, I think that the two go hand in hand.
You do.
I don't necessarily think that the applicant would want to move forward with the merger if the application for the larger project was not going to happen, so I think that it would be best to treat them both the same.
So both could be done.
I would add one thing further to that, is because the merger would then necessitate the demolition of the home, that it's the town's policy that we have a project when there be demolition of the home. So if the proposal for the office is denied, really wouldn't be appropriate to take an action on the lot merger at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. Further discussion or a motion? Commissioner Sayak?
I'm ready to make a motion. Okay, based on the evidence presented both in the staff report and the hearing tonight, and I'll cite a couple of elements that I've seen, and I ask commissioners feel free to add on. I'm going to cite section 29.20.140D of the zoning code, which states that the purpose of architecture inside approval is to regulate height, width, shape, proportion, siding, exterior construction, and design of buildings to ensure that they are architecturally compatible with their surroundings. I cannot make that finding. I also cite land use element A, goal LG21, LG22, LP21, L147, CDP17, basically talking about land use being compatible with the surrounding development, and can also not make those findings. So based on those, I move to deny application permit number 424-27011, requesting approval to demolish a single-family residence built prior to 1941, a 3,250-square-foot office building, merge two existing parcels, and construct a new 15,500-square-foot office building on property zone 0.
I'll second it.
Thank you. I have a second. Commissioner Machici? Discussion? Commissioner O'Donnell?
I would just like to ask the maker of the motion whether she would consider putting in something about the refusal, I think, to give a community benefit. I think the answer we got on community benefit is the answer everybody could make at all times about their business, and I don't think it justifies a finding of community benefit, and I think it would be helpful if we make that part of your motion, so I would request that.
Absolutely.
Acceptable to the motion maker?
For
the
reminding
seconder? Did you get the text of that, Mr. Suda? All right. Commissioner Rice?
I think also we should make note that this was brought to the Conceptual Development Advisory Committee some 14 months ago, and I believe the applicant at that time was given very specific direction about the mass and scale of the proposal, and it has been virtually unchanged since that time, plus that the applicant was very clear in their desire not to change the mass and scale at this point in time. So rather than sending it back to staff for redesign, which they have essentially refused, that's the further basis for denial.
Thank you. Other discussion? Commissioner Bourgeois?
Thank you. Since I have a feeling this is, our decision is going to be appealed, I think we should give council all of our thoughts on all of these issues, and I'd like to echo the sentiments that have been stated about the story poles. The model, when you look at it, the architecture is beautiful. It's a beautiful building, but the model provides zero context. You don't know what the building's across, next to, anything. Looking at the model on the table, looks like a nice building, but it's all about context. So if the model is going to be used, I would prefer story poles, strongly prefer story poles, but if it's going to be used, you need to see the buildings up and down the street and across the street as well. I think having that building in a model in a vacuum serves no purpose. I think I'm glad Commissioner O'Donnell brought up the community benefit. I think that's the answer was left something to be desired. I think the purpose of the community benefit policy, for those of you out there, is to offset some impact of this project, and I think perhaps traffic at that intersection, school kids, bike lanes, something that is a concern to all of us would be something for the applicant to consider in the way of community benefit, something along those lines. I think the staff report and their suggestions were fantastic, and I fully support all of those suggestions, and I think the arborist's concern about certain oak trees, that their removal do not meet our tree removal policy. If you break the building up and have more of a neighborhood-like context, you could even save those trees. So I'm going to be supporting the motion, and those are my additional comments.
Other discussion? I'll simply add mine, that I agree strongly with everything that's been said. And if it's to come back to us again, I'd give great deal of credence to the staff report and the staff recommendations. Other discussion? Hearing none, let's call the motion.
Mr. Chair, just before the motion is called, I just want to clarify for the record that the motion and the second concerned a motion on both the architecture and site application and the subdivision application.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Calling the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes to deny 6-0.
Appeal rights. Anyone dissatisfied with the decision of the Planning Commission may appeal the decision to the Town Council. The appeal must be filed within 10 days. It must be filed upstairs in the Clerk Department. There are fees for filing an appeal.
Thank you, Mr. Korb. We move on now to continued other business. We have no continued other business, so we move to new business. Item 1. Consider changing election and date of the chair and the vice chair of the Planning Commission. Mr. Suter, could you give us a staff report?
Yes, staff placed this item on the agenda at the request of several commissioners, and this is relating to the fact that over the past 7 or 8 years, at a minimum, the Commission has selected its chair and vice chair during the month of December, during the Commission's only meeting in December. It was pointed out to us during this cycle that the Commission's bylaws require that that selection be made in February. And at the request of several commissioners, we placed this item on the agenda for consideration of a request to council to modify the Commission's bylaws to move that back to an earlier date, such as December or January.
Yes, sir.
I recall that when I first came on, the new commissioner started, I believe, in the month of February or March. We didn't start in January. So that an election in December usually came coincident with the start of the new commissioners. We start in January now. I see all the more reason to move it back.
Yeah, just if I may, just as a clarification, the council wanted to consolidate all of the boards and commission appointments to a single process. So rather than having boards staggered and the process stretched out over a period of many months through several council meetings, they consolidated it all, within the December-January period.
I've discussed this with Mr. Suda, and I'm hoping you'll join me in support of the proposal. My main concern is that we join our committees when all others are joining those committees, so that we don't go in a junior status, so to speak. And it would be a simple matter to ask council to consider making the appointments in December prior to our one meeting in December, if that's possible, so that we can have our new commission, if there are any changes, at our first meeting, and then conduct our election, and then seat our new committee members beginning the 1st of January. That was my intent in bringing it up.
Excuse me, just cut
Yes,
there.
sir.
You want the new members coming on to vote the chair?
Yes,
I tend to...
as opposed to outgoing members voting for the chair, as opposed to waiting another month or two on committee assignments.
I guess I don't see much wrong with it.
Commissioner
Probably
Bourgeois?
understand, But anyway.
So we would be voting first meeting in January and then seating the new chair and vice chair at the second meeting in January.
No, we'd be voting at our one and only meeting in December, and then having those elected.
If council
Correct.
appoints. But then the commissioner's term, even outgoing ones, will be seated at the last meeting in December.
They would finish up their term if there was a meeting in
So how is the
December.
new member going to vote?
Oh, I see. Well, then the new members would start.
I'm all for it, but I think the outgoing members should vote. I think
What Commissioner Michichi and I are saying, and I'm hitchhiking on his early remarks, is it's worked well for 3 years that I know of, and certainly prior to that we did the elections the way we did. Putting it into the current procedure puts us 2 months behind the committees that we then join in February or later. Yes, sir.
I think we can all kind of agree on what we're trying to do. It's the mechanics that are a little difficult. What we need, I think, is to have any new commissioner that has to be appointed, whether it's an incumbent or not an incumbent, appointed, and then the election follow, because otherwise you can have an election of somebody who's not reappointed, which is not a good idea. So if we could get this done, our suggestion is simply that we do it as soon as possible, that the appointment occur, I think the appointments occur in December, don't they? If they do occur in December, and the new members don't start until January 1st, assuming that to be the case, and we want the new members to be able to vote, and that's the question, and we couldn't vote till the first meeting in January. If we say, if the new members, and that could be an incumbent, is appointed before the first meeting in December, then you could vote, but it would be the old members voting, but at least they'd know whether the old member they're voting for is going to be there come January, and that may work.
If we're interested in going forward with trying to make a better procedure at it, as opposed to the one we had this year, I hope you would support my request that we give it to staff to articulate it, to work out a few examples by calendar, and then to write down a request we would forward to council. Commissioner Rice.
I in support in principle with what you're trying to do. I think it's important to have new members of a committee start when other new members of a committee start. I would say I believe it would be in the best interests not to have a brand new member of the commission who has no experience, no knowledge necessarily of the people on the commission voting for who are going to be the chair and vice chair. So I support the idea of letting staff come up with a proposal and sending that on to council. I would just say I think it makes more sense to have the outgoing commission, even if everybody's going to continue, but the outgoing commission be the people who vote for the next chair and vice chair.
Very good. Let's pass that along to staff and see what they can write up. I don't want you to vote on it, but do I have a consensus on that?
Yes.
Mr. Suda, can you take it from here? Thank you. Item 2, on our new business, we have a report from the Director of Community Development. Thank you. Item 2 on our new business, we have a report from the Director of Community Development.
Just one quick announcement. The Community Development Department hired a new code compliance officer. I think many of you know Roy Alba, who has been our code compliance officer for many years. He's been promoted to building inspector. He's been taking his certification classes and been training to become a building inspector for several years now, and the town's been supporting him in those classes, and we finally had an opening, and we were able to promote him into the building inspector classification. We've hired a new code compliance officer to take his place. Her name is Bella Kokic. She comes to us from the Housing Authority of Santa Clara County, where she is in charge of investigating housing fraud cases. So she comes to us with a lot of background on conducting investigations, working with the attorney's office, the DA's office, and local police departments. So she has a very strong investigative mindset. And she's working with Roy right now to learn the codes and policies of the town, and she should be up to speed here in the next month or so.
Thank you, Mr. Suda. Our third item concerned training, but I'm going to move it to fourth so I don't forget the third item. And the third item, Commissioner Rice said he wanted to address new business.
Under commission matters, as most of you, I would assume, know, or all of you know, I've declared my intention to run for town council. With that in mind, I will be submitting a resignation from the Planning Commission. I don't think I want to try and do both, implement policy and talk about making policy. I will be doing it in the May-June timeframe. As soon as I have to talk to staff and find out, I don't want to leave the Planning Commission with an empty seat for any longer than would be practical. So I will find out from them how long it takes the council to go through the process of noticing and preparing to appoint a replacement, and then I will be resigning.
Thank you, Commissioner. Item 4 was training. Commissioner Talasfore was to report on the matter of training since this was her football. She has given us an email on topics. And Mr. Suda, do you want me to read these into the record or just accept her email?
I think we can just ask the commissioners if they've had a chance to read her email and if they have any other comments on it.
Have we had a chance to read the email, and do we want to supplement the list?
I'm seeing two people now that have their own read it. So.
Yeah, I have not.
I just saw it briefly. I haven't had a chance to consider it.
Looks like I'm the only one that read it, so I don't know my other.
Well, Phil and I, you can go to training because I read it.
If it's a short list, you want to just read it?
Well, the point is, we were looking at the so-called fifth Monday in April to begin acting on this list, and that date is not available to us, as staff will not be available. So we look to the so-called fifth Wednesday in July, July 30th, unless among us we can find another date that works. So I think this matter can be continued to our next meeting. We all have the email. We all can go over the list and see if we want to add to it. But we also come back with a sense of, yes, we can do July 30, or perhaps we'll contact each of you and see if there's an alternative date.
I heard some are going to be on vacation at that time, in fact.
Vacation?
Weren't you one of them? Very good. Yeah.
Vacation from
Vacation.
the planning commission? I missed Commissioner Machici. I'm shocked. Any other business?
I wanted to say something.
Yes, sir.
I did not realize that Steve was going to be resigning. I was aware that he was going to run. I just wanted to say before the evening was over, having heard that I will miss him. What you've done for the commission has been personally benefiting to me, and so I didn't want you to go home tonight thinking I just told everybody I was going to resign, and they said, see you later. So you will.
From the throngs in the audience.
You will be missed.
Thank you. I'm not going away quite yet, but it'll be sooner than I'd like. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Donnell, and we are adjourned.